Okay guys, I got a little project here. Just going to show you, do a little leather work today. Dug around out in the shop, finally found my stitching tool. Got my awl. I've got a scrap belt which is pretty thick and stiff, nice stiff piece. And the plan, okay, this is what they call the side slide, and this is supposed to go with your belt going in here, going behind it, and coming back out. For me, that doesn't work. The whole thing just bellies out, and it's ridiculous. It doesn't even do anything. Now you can see I got some big scrape marks here. So this is not exactly a pristine piece, so I don't feel bad about messing with it. The idea is I'm going to cut a section of belt, okay, that's about as wide as this piece here. I'm going to cut two sections of it. And I'm going to stitch one section right there. And I'm going to stitch one section right there. And what that'll do is, if I had a big wide stiff piece of leather, I'd just stitch one piece. But what that's going to let me do now is hopefully make the leather conform to my belt so I can wear this thing and not look like a total dork. Because it is kind of retarded. These things just flap out. When you run it over the whole Kydex, it works, but it looks retarded. I mean, you get these little pieces just sticking out on either side of your belt. You got your belt going over across the outside of your holster. It doesn't even look normal, but it works, you know. And you can't have people laughing at your gun rig. So this will be a nice hidden mod. It'll be hidden on the back. You won't even be able to see it. And it'll keep me busy for a little while. I'll show you some progress in a bit. Okay, here's how I'm going to proceed. Got a nice sharp Gerber gaiter here. How to do the job. Be able to push cut right through this. Yeah. Tell you what, this gaiter's been a good friend, man. I've had this thing for God knows how long. Nice cut. I don't think that's real leather. I think that's some sort of fake leather, but you know what? It's going to be good enough. And then what I need to do is make it about that big, okay? That's fine. Go right to there. Do the same thing. And I'll make two pieces exactly the same size. Just get a little incision there. Something to follow, right? And then push right through. One thing about having a really, really sharp knife is that you can do stuff like that. So, it's a good size. I can just make another piece, same size. A little mark. I used to enjoy doing leather work. Used to do a fair amount of it just to amuse myself, making pouches and little things and holsters and whatnot. But then I got busy making money. There wasn't a lot of time for fun stuff like this. Now here I am broke, and I can go back to it, right? Okay, so that's all I need that belt for. Now, what I need to do is punch a neat series of holes across the end of this, right? Make sure this is still in frame. You guys can still see what I'm doing. So what I'll do is I'll just come in an even amount, just like if you're drilling a hole in a piece of wood, you know. Yeah, come over here, do the same thing. And then work on getting an even spacing. And if you have any kind of eye, you should be able to do this by eye. punching holes is going to make life so much better than take your time and do a nice job with this, and you can use your hole punched piece as a pattern. Okay, so just wanted to show you a couple other things before I get on to the stitching and whatnot. First of all, I like to make sure that I've enlarged the holes. The purpose for that is for this very large gauge stitching needle to easily fit through. Okay, once that's done, now you can see how my stitching lines up with these lozenges, and I want to put another row of stitching in there. So what I did is first I measured to make sure I want 2 inches. So I've got a 2 1/8 opening at the lozenge. So if I come in a 1/16 on either side, that's 2 inches. So that's plenty, and the most that I usually wear is an 1 3/4 belt. So it shouldn't be a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to center this on the 2 lines that I've traced across from the lozenges, and I'm going to trace marks across these little leather straps, and I'm going to punch another series of holes. So it'll be double stitched top and bottom, just like this. This is how it'll go. And I'm going to leave these holes open like this, so when it does get stitched, these will be like this. And the reason for leaving this hole open is because I may want to run my other shell. This is for the big shell with the light. So there you have it. So that's what's going to happen. And then I'll show you when I start stitching up, because you already seen how I punch holes and stuff. You don't need to see that. And I'm almost done here. Transferring my little hole marks. So I just centered the piece, squared it up, traced around it so that if it shifted I'd know. Poke straight down, give it a little rotate on the way out, and got a whole bunch of little prick marks. So now poke those all the way through, enlarge those, and I'll be ready to show you some stitching. Okay, I've got a little stitching done. Thought I'd show you my handiwork. All I did was stitch the top and bottom row of this, and I'll show you how this little stitching tool works. It's a pretty neat little thing to have. It's very compact, easy to travel with. It's got a little spool inside. When the spool starts to run down, it's going to make more drag on your deal. And ideally, you can set this thing up with this, by the way you wrap this around and everything, that it'll pretty much do a lot of the work for you. But if you can't get this string to pull out smoothly, which it needs to be able to pull nicely out of there, it won't work right. Okay, so let me show you some stitching here. So I'm going to start right here. I've already got holes punched through everything, both sides. Which you really need to have that, because this is not the hole punching tool. It is the stitching tool. You do not want to. Now you take your runner, your thread that's going to go through the whole piece, okay, and you want to pull out enough of that where you can cover your line of stitching and have enough to work with to tie a couple of knots. You don't want to be fighting at the end with a tiny little piece to try and get that to work for you, which is why you need to pull some out. But that should be about sufficient. So then I hold this in place so it doesn't get too crazy there. And I poke through the next hole. Don't want to poke your fingers, that's painful. Okay, and up it comes. Now this is hanging up still, so it's not doing exactly what I want. I need to re-spool, but I just want to get this done. Now you poke it through this loop. See how I pushed it up? When I pull it down, it makes a loop. This is why they call it the runner. It just runs between each loop. Now when you pull down, it pulls it into the material. And you want to do this so that your thread, your hole of your stitching tool is just running along so that nothing's bound up or twisted or working too hard to make anything happen, okay? And you don't really want to make a giant loop like this. You want to make as small a loop as you can get. And that's what the tension on this is all about, is that it reduces the amount of work you have to do, because it'll pull everything through for you and keep everything lined up for you. Okay. And now the loop is smaller, which is what I wanted. Let's see the small loop. Okay, and through we go. Okay. And it's all about controlling the process. And you can always pull the thread out and do it again, because you want to get it exactly the way you want it. You don't want it any messy looking thing. I mean, as much time as it takes to do this stuff, you can do it. Take the time to do it right, or redo it, or whatever you have to do. Yeah, I'm going to run out of thread here. It's pulling it into the hole. I didn't give it enough slack. I should have had more slack on my little guy. This is going to be a real pain to tie off, let me tell you. Okay, now I got to get this. This is so tight it's pulling my thread hard. Get that slacked up a little bit. Okay, go through the last hole. Okay, this is where I'm going to tie off. So once I get through there, hang on to this thread, make sure it doesn't get away. Poke that through. Okay, now I'm going to want to get some free thread. If you can just take the whole thing loose and get this thread to come up from the spool. This is all spooled thread, okay? This is coming out. You don't want to get confused and cut the wrong piece. And cut it, pull your stitching tool out, and now, if you did everything right, you'll be able to tie off a nice knot. But as you can see, I really didn't leave myself a lot to work with here. Clip this off so it's not such a huge piece to work with. Well, you just tie a square knot, and then what I like to do is tie another knot at each loose end of the square knot, and then clip it and melt it. Okay, so I'm about ready to put the shell back on it and put it on and see how it feels. But before I put it back together, I just wanted to show you guys the stitching real close. You can get a look at it. It doesn't look bad. I mean, it could be more straight, more regular, but it's primarily hidden by the shell, so you shouldn't see it. And the final little touch I want to do is I got some mink oil here, and you can see these babies are right in the runway here. So let's lube those up, because that's where I'm scratching the heck out of it with my Streamlight TLR4. So why not? The gun's going to be rubbing against these little stitchings, which is why I've tried to make them as tight as possible, pull them into the horsehide as much as possible. Yeah, and give one more good rub down this, and then just rub it out, rub out that mink oil. There's not a big conglomeration of it in any particular place. Okay, and the part of the gun, in case you're curious, that was causing the problem, was where these were two nubs. So when they were sticking out about 1/8 of an inch, two nubs sticking out, then they were really digging up the leather. So I went down to the shop, took the screw, ground it down. But what I didn't think about was that my grinding created a razor sharp burr, a razor sharp edge, and that's what sliced the leather up, was this little edge right here. So I dressed that down with some really fine grit. Got it so it's nice and round and smooth now. So hopefully it won't be digging anything up. But the next step will be to install the shell using the Chicago screws, okay, which is no big deal. You don't need to see that. And then I'm going to put it on and see if it conforms to my body and if it makes a nice secure rig. Because before it wasn't even safe. You wouldn't even want to do it. The whole holster was just flopping out like this, and your gun would just end up flopping out. So, modified that, and we'll see how it runs. Alright, so I've got the thing back together. It's way stiffer, as you might imagine. So even without being on the belt, the retention is much, much better. Excellent retention. Before it would just flop right out. So that's an improvement even before I've put anything into it. So let's go ahead and put this thing on a belt. This is an 1 3/4 511 UDT belt. It's not terribly, I don't know, stiff, whatever you want to call it. One thing it will do is it'll go through these little slots nice. It's got an epoxied tongue, so it's easy to feed through. It's got that little angle that helps it go, but it is very limp indeed. Now let's pull that up. Get that going. Yeah, that's really grabbing it good. That's what I was looking for. Exactly what I wanted. If I can just get it to feed past these Chicago screws, it would be nice. It's so limp, you can barely get it to go anywhere. Okay, and then out this one. Okay, so now I've got something that will conform to my body instead of flopping out. So let me strap this bad boy on and see what it feels like. Okay, time to get an appraisal as to whether or not I accomplished what I needed to do with just doing the leather work, whether I need to do some more work on this holster. I think it's pretty clear that I need to do some more Kydex forming, but there's sort of a limit to how much I'm going to be able to do. I can't distort this. However, this is the tension here, where this screw is what's pulling this front out so much. And it's really not possible to get the gun to totally lay up against me the way I want, but I can improve it, I believe. See how this sticks out? Let's see how this sticks out. I feel if I heat this, push this in, heat this, push this in, I'm going to get a better fit. Because right now I'm getting a lot better retention. I can actually count on the holster to be the same place every single time. It doesn't move, but it is pretty far away from the body, and there is this gigantic flop here, which I don't like. So I'm going to do a little Kydex forming and see if I can cure that. We're getting there. Okay, so let's do a little Kydex forming. I've got to do it on the leather this time so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to probably have to have the gun in there too to keep it from getting totally beat up. This is going to be noisy. I'll let you know. Try and get that to bend more this way, like that, which I think I'm getting. It doesn't take a lot of heat to do it. You could probably use a hot air gun, but I'm wondering if that would be too aggressive. So I want this to twist it down like that. Okay, so you can see that that's been changed, right? And now I'm going to turn around and I'm going to work on this area right here and try and get that without distorting this. That'll be tricky. Warp this one flange and get it really, really hot so I can get a good bend on it. See if that was enough. Okay, you can see that did warp it some. So this one's warped in, and now this is warped in a little more than it was. Not sure if it's enough, though. We'll find out in a second. Okay, I did a bunch more heat forming, Some of it with it attached to the lever, some of it with it off of the lever to straighten the flange out and get it to look right. It's too ripply when I was just doing it against the lever. But this isn't sticking out as much now. And this isn't sticking out like it used to. It used to just stick straight out. So, let's see if it works. Alright, so here's the results of much work. Stitched on the straps, warped it so it would lay up against this now, and hopefully not sticking out too far in the back anymore. Now, let's take the cleared and safety checked weapon and see what it does. And immediately it makes a bulge! Yay! Yeah, there's really no way around it. See, I've already deformed this a little bit. Sight still comes up clear of it. You see that, see? So the sight is still got plenty of travel. But the little bulge here won't go away. But it fits much, much better than it did just a little while ago. So, wow, my camera sounds like it's got gravel in it when I run the zoom. So, good retention. You can see it's really on the belt. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to sag out much, but if I pull it really hard, I still get that ridiculous bulge. There's really no way around it. The only way to do it would be to have a strap between the Chicago screws on either side of the belt, right there. I'd have to have like another strap. But the Chicago screws really aren't big enough to accept. I'd have to use longer ones. And what it really needs is a longer Kydex shell. So, am I done modifying this thing? Maybe. Am I happy with it? I'm happier. But yeah, it just doesn't look right. I just don't like that. It doesn't seem like a good thing to me. It's much closer to my body now. That's good. Not as much of a chance of it snagging. So I will use it, but not entirely happy with it. But then again, I'm very picky, very hard to please. That's why I modify everything I get until it satisfies me. If it doesn't satisfy me, I find something sooner or later that will. Alright then, I'm going to call it quits on that. So, I hope you found my epic journey of holster modification mildly entertaining. And if you want to, leave a comment. You can rate this, and you can subscribe to my channel if you like this sort of thing. Thanks.